All right, thank you everybody for coming tonight. I now call to order the Champaign County Board of Environment and Land Use Committee. The time is 6:30 something, 3. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Rogers,
Present.
Farney,
Here.
Owen, Rodriguez,
Here.
Storr,
Present.
Esri,
Here.
Thorsland,
Here. All right, we have a quorum with one member absent. Don did notify me before the meeting that he wouldn't be here tonight. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda with addendum.
So moved, Rogers.
Rogers?
Oh.
Do we need to make a special provision for the communications or not?
Well, that'll be public presentations, and we'll just do it then. Participation. Okay, thank you, Aaron, for a second. Aside from Chris's input, any changes? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? All right, that's approved. We have the minutes of June 6, 2024 before us, the regular meeting. I'd entertain a motion to approve. Moved by John. We got a second by, I'm giving it to Aaron this time. So any corrections or changes to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Seeing none, those are done. All right, public participation. Just for the record, we have one presenter tonight that's actually 2 people, and if, with the board's forgiveness, we give them 10 minutes tonight. They have a short presentation they'd like to give us. And if no one has an issue with that, I will first, though, call Norm Davis to the microphone and turn that on and give us your name, and the floor is yours, Norm.
Good evening. My name is Norman Davis. I'm the Champaign Township Supervisor. And if you will remember from the last meeting, I was here then and the meeting before that. I'm sure you'll remember a couple of months ago when I was addressing this committee about the problems that can be created by the lack of policies and rules governing the ownership of animals within the county. That time, the problem was specific to one residential area bordering the city of Champaign's town borders, and this committee addressed the problem of roosters by banning the ownership and keeping of those birds within 1,000 feet of a home rule city or town. And while that ordinance was well-intentioned, and I applaud you all for passing that the way you did, and the full board passed it unanimously, it didn't go far enough, I'm afraid, and as you are well aware, the people who owned the roosters decided that because they had to get rid of those, they brought in hogs. And that was only resolved by the next door neighbor threatening legal action against them. And they decided that rather than go to court and pay the lawyers more money, they would back off, which was great. But my point here is that perhaps that didn't need to come to that action already if there had been policies and rules concerning that, and that's why I'm here. And regarding that incident, I have received a number of calls, messages, and visits from people who agree that some practices are not appropriate in residential areas. And we've addressed that, and most of you tend to agree with that. I and others would like to thank the committee for starting to look into the lack of policy. And I feel that some rules are needed so that people can know what is acceptable and what is not when it comes to animals and humans as they interact within a residential area. Now, historically, barnyard animals are generally kept on farms, although you can also find times, especially in our colonial times, up until the invention of certain things, when cows and horses were kept in residential areas. We also had to deal with diseases like typhoid and cholera and things like that due to poor sanitation. But as we as humans have progressed and evolved, inventions like the refrigerator allowed us to keep meat, eggs, milk, and the like cool and well preserved. and the need for keeping animals for food in residential areas was, by and large, abandoned. The methods of preserving some meats may not be entirely desirable to some people, and I recognize that, and maybe I should be a little more concerned about how my food is processed. But if one wants a more authentic experience with their food, no one would deny their ability to have that experience as long as it is done on a farm and not in a residential area. Residential areas are not farms, and they are not intended to be used as farms for the growing of foodstuffs. Now, small gardens for growing supplementary fruits and vegetables are acceptable all over the world. But many barnyard animals are not for various reasons, not excluding things like the smell, the ground pollution, and the diseases brought up by the waste products. So we need to look at that. Right now, there are no rules in the county. Now, there are rules by the state that require certain limitations on livestock. They even regulate how far you're allowed to have your residence from the animals. A quarter of a mile is usually what they say. You have to have a minimum distance between the barn and the house. We also have, that by the way is outlined in the Livestock Management Facilities Program, but that is usually limited to farms. And the state also prohibits the average citizen from keeping dangerous animals. And then that's reasonable. Well, what it is up to this committee to come up with is rules and ordinances that will help people decide what is acceptable and what is not. Things to be considered might include just what constitutes a residential area. I mean, even if it is not zoned residential. Does a string of 4 or 5 houses along next to a cornfield make a residential area? Or is it a greater number of homes with streets that are not oil and chip? What animals might be considered acceptable or within those boundaries that the county makes up a residential area? Is it limited to household pets, such as cats and dogs, maybe monkeys? Or can it include chickens and roosters, turkeys, waterfowl, cows, and horses? If larger animals are to be considered in a residential area, what means of containment are appropriate? How is waste material supposed to be handled, and how is the smell to be abated? These and other questions should be addressed, complete with public hearings, polls, etc., to find out what the people want and what ordinances should be made accordingly. So I urge this committee to continue working on this problem. If it happens with one family, another family will think it's okay to have barnyard animals in smaller communities, and just looking for the threshold of permissibility. Let's start working on this so that all of Champaign County can know what the rules are. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you, Norm. I now call Andrew Wren and Pam Rickard, and they're going to share their time.
Thanks. Is this live? Red is live?
Yes, it is.
Great. So I'm here today to talk about our water, and I'm also here to slowly load my slides that I forgot to load before I started talking. Let's just get the slide. Great. And this again. Okay, I'm Andrew Rain. I work for Prairie Rivers Network. I'm the Climate Policy Director, and this is Pam Richard. She works for the Eco Justice Collaborative, and she's the co-director. We're here to talk about the Mahomet Aquifer, which is the drinking water source for likely everybody in this room. It serves almost 1 million people, provides clean drinking water, safe drinking water, and at least for now, very abundant drinking water, and is a precious resource that we need to preserve, especially considering it is designated as a sole source aquifer. So this is a map of the sole source designated Mahomet Aquifer in the regions that it covers. So it goes all the way almost to the east side of the state and then reaches to the west over to Peoria. And this area designated as sole source aquifer is a US EPA designation that offers it some protection, but what it means is if that water was impacted, the users of that water would not have a reasonable alternative drinking water source. And today I want to talk about a threat to that aquifer, which is carbon sequestration. So there are 4 sequestration wells being proposed. Class 6 is the designation of them from the US EPA. And these wells are going to be over the next long period of time, 25 years plus. They're proposed to inject carbon, CO2, in a critical fluid state deep underground, like a mile underground. There's some numbers there to give you a sense of how much it is, although I know those numbers are more or less meaningless. We'll get into the scale of what's being proposed in a minute, but I just wanted to lay the groundwork of carbon sequestration is coming, and the volumes of it are much, much larger than what we've discussed before. So what is carbon sequestration? So capturing carbon is a process done at things like coal-fired power plants or ethanol plants. That captured carbon is then transported to a site that might sequester the carbon. So that means injecting it deep underground into a saline aquifer. This also has coal mines and enhanced oil recovery. Those aren't going to happen in Illinois, so we're just looking at injection into a saline aquifer. So saline aquifer means salt aquifer. So it's not drinking water. They're typically below sea level. So like I said, a mile underground, pretty far. But that sort of goes down there, and then it wants to rise because it's buoyant. And so it finds cap rocks. And ideally, what they're intending to do is store it somewhere where that cap rock will contain it as it tries to go back up. So when you think about the threats of injection of CO2, it's injected down and it wants to come back up. This is happening because the Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed in 2022, a federal law, increased the incentives for sequestering carbon. So it suddenly went from being something that didn't pencil out to something that was very attractive for industries that are producing large amounts of carbon to start thinking about doing. And why here? Why is this being proposed in Illinois, and in particular in the Champaign-Urbana area, or the Mahomet Aquifer area? I apologize. So this is a map of a sweet spot in the Mount Simon sandstone aquifer. So the Mount Simon is, again, that formation that's a mile deep. And they've identified, through various reasons, based on pressure, thickness, that this region, and highlighted in red, is where they would really most economically be able to store that carbon. If you know the Mahomet Aquifer well, you could probably mentally imprint the Mahomet Aquifer's footprint over that, which I should have done ahead of time, but that would more or less overlap with significant portions of that deep red region where they would like to be sequestering the carbon. So what is the risk? Why are we concerned about CO2 being sequestered underground? On the left, it shows sort of the number of pathways, and then on the right, it describes why these are threats. So the injection well itself can be a source of leaks. If that injection well has a failure point, if it's going through the aquifer, it could just be leaking CO2 in the aquifer, or if it has a failure point down where it's injecting, that CO2 could travel up along the casing or adjacent to the injection well and contaminate our drinking water sources. You also, that cap rock I was describing earlier that's intended to contain the CO2, that could have fractures, and there's a couple different failure mechanisms, but this would essentially be a way for the CO2 to escape up through a fracture and then get into the layers above. And then the last main threat that comes to mind is abandoned wells. So other wells that might be piercing through our aquifer down into the saline aquifer for previous uses, whether it was injection or maybe they're not going all the way, but they provide this connective pathway that lets the CO2, it leaks a little in one place and gets to that well, and that well then is the pathway that it takes up to the aquifer. So there's a couple different pathways, and the threats are 3, and I put the bottom one is the biggest threat, which I should have put first. But if CO2 gets into our drinking water source, well, you just get bubbly water, right? Well, no. What happens is acidification. So it forms carbonic acid. Carbonic acid would then start changing the pH of our aquifer. So the chemistry of our water is really important, and it determines what constituents in that aquifer are either non-reactive and dormant or suddenly become reactive. So a more acidic aquifer could suddenly be releasing toxic heavy metals. The quotes on the right are from a study from the Department of Energy. And you also could get situations where the saltwater aquifer that they're injecting into and is pushing outward then gets into, that saline water then gets into our Mahomet, and you have salinity issues in the Mahomet. So there's a number of different threats, including things like arsenic being released in the aquifer if a CO2 project would leak. And just to go over the existing rules, so Class 6 well permits do regulate CO2 injection. That's a federal permit. These provide things like site characterization, monitoring requirements, emergency plans, reporting. That is not a comprehensive list. There are also a state legislation was passed, which was called the Safe CCS Act, that solidified some of these requirements, some that were optional in the Safe Drinking Water Act. It made required. But one of the key parts here is that the Safe CCS Act requires an alternate water supply if there's a leak. And you might have noted earlier that we talked about whether or not there is an alternate water supply for the Mahomet, which the federal government has said there is not. A sequestration ban was fought for, and we did not win it during these negotiations in May. So this was something that we would like to. We're not ready to give up on the Mahomet, and Pam is going to talk a bit more about why it's a problem and how we can solve it.
Thanks, Andrew. I am Pam Richard of the Eco Justice Collaborative in Champaign, Illinois. And I'm going to piggyback from where Andrew left off here. As Andrew just noted, the Safe CCS Act, which was adopted just this last spring and signed into law in July, does require a sequestration operator to provide an alternative supply of drinking water if it becomes contaminated. That's a way of the state's legislative process saying you can potentially have a leak. And if there is a leak, you have to fix it, you have to replace it. You juxtapose that against what we just heard Andrew say, and you all know well, that if you have a sole source designated aquifer, you have a problem here because there's no physically available or economically feasible alternative. So there's kind of a problem here, right? Those two things don't go together, which is why we're advocating a ban. As Andrew noted before, we're looking at CCS here in our back door at an unprecedented scale. I'm sure you all are familiar with ADM's project that started in 2011 with a small pilot project. In 2016, they began their commercial scale project, but it's really little. After 11 years, 12 years, they've only sequestered about less than 4 million metric tons of CO2. You contrast that with what you're seeing in the second half of the table below with what's being proposed, and there's a lot happening all at once. And what we're expecting to have to take place in the next few months is the US EPA will be issuing draft permits for all of these projects starting in October and going past the new year into February. That'll trigger a public comment process. That'll trigger their analysis of the proposal, and they will, if everything goes as well as the developers hope, we could start seeing these projects approved in final form as early as this coming spring. You'll see here on this particular slide that the projects that are affecting the aquifer have an asterisk. You can also see that more clearly on the handout we gave to you. Well, how much is this? The proposed storage of all projects is 116 times that currently stored by ADM. 116 times, that's huge. What about that proposed for in the aquifer? We're looking at projects that are 65 times that stored by ADM to date. So will they all leak? Probably not. Will some of them leak? We don't know. But what we do know is that leaking does happen. We do know that the developers are not guaranteeing that it won't leak. An example of a leak that happened in Norway didn't start until 20 years after the project started. Takes a while for that CO2 to rise up to the cap rock. So ADM's been storing since 2011, so what is that, about 12 years, 13 years maybe. So we know it can leak because it has in other places. And by the way, that was with a project that stored about half of what is being proposed by Heartland Greenway Carbon Storage's two projects, which you see on the table are about there we go, about 62.5 tons or 2.5 metric tons a year. So, and we know that natural gas has leaked. You all know and are well versed in the leak that happened with People's Gas. I don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But it did take the Attorney General to file a complaint. It did take appropriation of tax dollars, taxpayer dollars, I want to underscore that, appropriation of $500,000 of the county board's ARPA funds, and a lot of resources to help fix the problem. To my understanding, we're still in the design stage. And is it fixed? No. After nearly 8 years, residents affected by that leak still do not have another alternative supply of water. 8 years, and I think we're still not finished with the design studies yet. So why would we risk our water with potential CO2 storage? We don't think we should. We think regulation is a risk. We think that, and I would ask you these questions, do we have guarantees that it won't leak? No. Do we have guarantees that agencies will be on top of monitoring or be able to swiftly address a leak? I'm not sure we have any guarantees of that. Our EPA, for example, is severely understaffed. And what about the developers themselves who are supposed to be doing the monitoring and the reporting? Do we trust that they will have our interests at heart, or will they be more concerned about profits? You may remember that People's Gas knew about the corrosion of the well in 1995 and did nothing until it was reported until 2016. So finally, our ask. We're here with a few asks of you this evening, and I don't know if there's going to be time to talk about them, but if there's not, perhaps we can come back and spend more time doing that. First of all, we're asking you to adopt a temporary moratorium, just a 6-month moratorium, so that you can study the feasibility of a prohibition of injection through and storage under the aquifer, and a special use permit for those activities that would be beyond the boundaries of the aquifer. And of course, as you know, a moratorium could be renewed if you need more time. I believe you have a handout that we sent along to Eric, right? That was a really great, we think, analysis of the powers of a county, what they can and cannot do, and talks about this at length. So I don't think I have time to go through that now, but I can answer questions. We're also asking you to pass a resolution calling for a legislative ban. So here we're hoping you'll take action at the local level and protect the water. We're also hoping that you'll pass a resolution that the state legislature will take note of and ask them to do a legislative ban. And the third thing we're asking here is to have you engage with the Mahomet Aquifer Advocacy Alliance. Champaign County Board was right there in the forefront of all the activity that was happening, both with getting the sole source aquifer designated, the Mahomet designated as a sole source aquifer, and for the consent decree for the landfill, as it was, as you all recall, the storage of PCBs and other toxic waste was threatening the aquifer. So we're hoping that you'll work with us to help get others on board to do what we're hoping you will do, which to get a ban in place with a special use permit, to get a resolution passed calling for a legislative ban, and together we can work to fill the gap that was left by the recently adopted Safe CCS Act. And we have questions we're ready to answer if you have them, or...
Yeah, we'll ask you to stay, and when this comes up in the
Okay.
agenda, if you're still available,
Yep.
I'm
Okay,
sure the
thank you.
board has questions. All right, I don't have any more public participation slips. If anyone else wants to speak tonight, now's the time to raise your hand. All right, if you wouldn't mind just putting your name on a slip and bringing it up, or passing it over here to John, maybe, just so that Liz has it for the record. And then the floor is yours. I now call, I want to trust my memory, Allison Harper.
Do I press it?
It's already on.
Okay. Hi, my name is Allison Harper. Sorry if I ramble a little. I really haven't had time to prepare a speech. In the last several months, life's been a little busy because my hobby farm is now 20 minutes from where I live. So it's 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back, 2 times every day. It's about 9.5 hours of commute time just to do basic maintenance. Now, we are incredibly privileged that we got access to land as quickly as we did and as close to town as we did. 20 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, and people say, oh, I drive 20 minutes to work. Except you drive home for lunch and then to back, and you work 7 days a week. And is it your hobby that you're not getting paid for? Because this is a hobby farm. There's no money coming in for this. This is passion and wanting to feed myself and future family better. Sorry, my phone's ringing, which is deeply distracting. I really lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. I currently don't have anything to lose. My animals are off the property in question. But I am here in defense of any other citizen in our beautiful county that, as far as I've understood my entire life growing up here, is very supportive of agriculture. I always thought that was the case. But I am here to defend anyone who wants to raise their own chickens because they know that those eggs are more nutritious because of what they fed them. And it's enriching, it's satisfying, and it disconnects you from everything in the modern world that we all kind of hate. It grounds you. So I guess I don't really know why I'm here, but I know I want to defend this. And I know the things that Norm Davis says are maybe uninformed at times. Last meeting, I recall he quoted some ways that can be regulated of livestock. And I recognize that document, and it calls for regulation of 500 animal units or more. Now, I don't know if anyone making these regulations is even informed on these topics, but an animal unit is 1,000 pounds of animal. We had 3 animal units, even with the pigs, even with everything. So it's important that if you are going to regulate the citizens of this county, that you really need to consider what you're regulating and understand how important it is for people like me to separate from the modern world and packaged food in that way. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, once again, if there's anyone else who would like to speak tonight, now's the time to raise your hand, or I will close public participation. All right, it's closed. We move on to communications for the board or any of the board members interested in communications tonight. Dr. Stewart?
Do we still have the household hazardous waste open for people to sign up?
It's the next
was-
agenda item.
Do you want me to answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
We're taking standby applications currently, Mr. Store. We're all full up, but people sometimes cancel, and then we move people into those slots.
We'll get whatever more detail there is in a moment. Any other communications for the board? Seeing none, we're going to move on to new business. This is very close to where you just were, Dr. Stewart. Items for information only. Places may still be available for household hazardous waste collection event at State Farm Center from 8 to 3. Anything else to add to that, John?
No, that was accurate when I put the agenda together, but I found out subsequently that all the slots had been filled, but we do take standby, and sometimes those folks do get to move up.
Okay, very good. Aaron?
Is it a go? I mean, was it?
Yes, it is a
the
go.
state?
Yes, yes.
I mean, it
Yeah.
went through, good.
And all the paperwork is in place, and we're ready to go.
All right, thank you, John. Thank you, Christopher. Moving on to new business items to be approved by ELOC. We have several entertainment licenses here. We'll do them one at a time just because there's not that many of them. A, recreation and entertainment license for Araceli Gutierrez for a Spanish rodeo at the Champaign County Fairgrounds, 1302 North Kohler Avenue, Urbana, to be held on August 11th, 2024. I'd entertain a motion to approve. Moved by John, a second by Emily. Any discussion on this one? If you read the application in there, everything has been passed. The sheriff has reviewed, and I don't think there's anything that is untoward here. Anything to add, John, on this one? No? Okay. Any discussion at all? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That one is approved. Moving on to item B, recreation and entertainment license for the same group, Araceli Gutierrez, for a Spanish rodeo at the Champaign County Fairgrounds at 1302 North Kohler, to be held on September 15th. Again, this is basically the same application as the other and has been looked over by everyone. A motion to approve? Moved by Emily, second by Aaron. Any discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? All right, that passes too. Review of livestock regulations, this is item C, in residential districts by other Illinois counties, and guidance for zoning administrator regarding possible nuisance ordinance and zoning ordinance amendments to restrict keeping of livestock in residential districts. And if you go to page 28, you'll see that John has put together a table. John, if you want to just do a quick review of that, I think that would be great. Thank you for all the work.
Sure. Mr. Farney had requested this a few months ago. And so basically summarizing this table, I didn't get a chance to check with all Illinois counties. First of all, the group of three that we consider ourselves most comparable to, McLean, Peoria, and Sangamon, those all essentially prohibit keeping of livestock in residential areas, although McLean allows it as long as your shelter is 150 feet from other properties, which would mean that your property is probably more than 10 acres in area. And Champaign County doesn't zone 10-acre lots residential, so that's not really comparable to our situation. But anyhow, that's those three counties.
Sure. There. What I see on the chart here is it allowed, and yes is for all three of those. And underneath Peoria and Sangamon, there are no restrictions, or none is listed.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I thought you had said that no livestock. I maybe misheard that.
Maybe I misspoke. So in those three counties that are most comparable, there's really no limits on keeping of livestock in residential areas in Peoria and Sangamon. McLean says they allow it, but again, you have to have these large lots, which are not comparable to Champaign County. Piatt County, which is not actually comparable, but it's close. Piatt County has no limits on keeping livestock in residential districts, but they've recently become aware that they're working on an amendment because it's become a problem. And their situation is a little different than ours. They have a lot of large rural subdivisions that are zoned residential, and keeping of livestock in those areas is raising a lot of problems. So they're working on an amendment. Two counties, DeKalb and Kankakee, established larger minimum lot sizes for livestock in residential districts. And again, I'm talking lot sizes that just don't match onto Champaign County residential districts. They would be ag districts in Champaign County. Two counties, Grundy and Rock Island, allow only chickens as livestock, and they prohibit the keeping of roosters. They also have requirements for keeping the chickens all contained and management of waste and things like that. So I imagine we'll be following their example in whatever we do. Kendall County, again, apparently has residential lots that are 20 acres or larger in area. And so they have this really complex matrix of what they allow in terms of animal units. It's based on the Illinois Livestock Management Facilities Act. I hope we don't get into that level of detail. I don't really see that necessary in Champaign County because we don't have large lots in our residential districts. Madison County down by St. Louis limits livestock in residential districts to horses, apparently by right, and then they allow a special use permit for goats, chickens, and honeybees. Kind of the most unusual mix, but they allow 1 or 2 horses depending on lot size, and you just get to do that by right. One county, Clinton, which is the smallest population county in this comparison, doesn't allow livestock in residential districts at all, which I was surprised by that too. So it's a real mix across the board. But there is a lot of examples of Illinois counties that do limit keeping livestock. I don't know if this helps you get an idea of what you think might be appropriate for Champaign County, but this standard of allowing 6 chickens on typical small lots, no roosters, that is, I'm finding that to be very common even among counties. That's what Champaign and Urbana do. Again, with requirements for keeping them enclosed, requirements for management of waste, things like that. I wouldn't think that a draft amendment like that would be too complicated. I don't know that I could have it by September, but definitely by October, if you wanted to look at something like that.
Questions for John? John? John?
Thank you. Thank you for pulling this together. This is exactly what I was hoping to find out, how other people are dealing with this. I guess initially the first question that comes to my mind is, and this is somewhat because I don't have our zoning ordinance memorized like you do. You probably dream about it at night, have nightmares. A residential subdivision, we're talking about the larger subdivisions. We're not, you can have a subdivision in an ag district, right? So like I'm thinking where I used to live, there's only 4 houses, but it was technically in a subdivision, but I think it was still zoned AG1 out there. That's kind of common throughout the county where you have the little one-offs where you have 4 or 5 houses along the road. And so we wouldn't be looking at regulating anything like that because I know a lot of those places, they have maybe the one old farmhouse was there and they've still got 5 acres and a pasture and they're keeping cows and goats and chickens and stuff. And yeah, there's 2 or 3 other houses by them, but there's also plenty of space and you're not in an actual, what I would consider a residential neighborhood to the amateur looking at it like me, right?
I agree, yeah.
Okay.
In fact, one thing that I want to point out is even in our outlying residential areas where it is residentially zoned, they're smaller lots. I'm not certain there's a need for controlling livestock in those areas. The people in those areas do have livestock, typically a very modest kind of livestock. But we do have the situation from Seymour where we've had a complaint about a rooster. And so that's something the committee is going to have to wrestle with.
That was going to be my next question. Is Seymour zoned as R1 or something like that, basically?
It's residential zoning, yes.
Okay, all right. I think that's all I have for right now. Thank you so much.
Other questions for John or discussion? I have mine, but I'm waiting for the end because I'm the chair and I can do that. Aaron?
This is just, I guess, discussion, kind of my thoughts. I kind of struggle with this. I know, well, I've had, various pets, livestock, you could say. They were more pets because by the time I came around, was born, our farm was not really production livestock. It was more, we had some chickens for some eggs, but they were largely pets and ducks and chickens and a Shetland pony and some goats and yada yada. Been around some livestock facilities. I've worked in them doing electrical and stuff like that. Some hog farrowing facilities and such. And there's neighbors, been around and such that have hogs and some cattle and stuff. So yeah, there's a smell and everything. I can appreciate people wanting to grow their own food, but I don't see how, when people are, I'm going to say, just because compared to where I live in the county, people are basically kind of stacked on top of one another. The idea that just because you get to have a cow, or you get to have a couple hogs, or you get to have 3 goats or whatever, and the neighbors basically have no say about it. Do I like regulation by government? In the big scheme of things, no. But this is a zoning issue. And if you want to argue, if somebody wants to argue that government zoning is totally bad and it needs to totally go away with, well, okay, I guess they could argue that. But yet, if you could do away with that, then, okay, I can open a landfill right beside you. I can start accepting, tires to shred and scrap. I can, take offal from rendering plants and store them for a little while and then haul them off to whatever, or, government has its place, I guess I'm trying to say. And we've already had this complaint. We've already kind of worked into it a little bit. Granted, not terribly far, but we've already put some effort into it. And I guess to kind of just quit, we've kind of done that with the bees. We never really did much with them, which, right or wrong, when we kind of just let it go, we haven't had anything come back up, but that's not to say that we won't. I guess I kind of feel that maybe we should get something on the books to maybe kind of head some of this off, or not that it'll necessarily head off issues, but at least be like, should another issue come up, we can pull it out and say it right here. It's not allowed in this situation, or if it was a complaint, it is allowed in this situation, depending on what it was. So I think we need to keep looking into it and exploring it, and probably end up passing something, is what I feel at this point in time. There's definitely more room out there for local farmers, small businesses to grow food and produce food and make it available locally, so that people truly know where their food comes from. And that's a good thing, but it takes growth. It takes people willing to do that work. Not everyone out in the country who farms is gonna wanna. Currently, we're basically grain around here: corn and beans, a little bit of wheat. Most of those farmers aren't gonna want to start raising livestock at this point in time. That's not what we've been doing, and not what we're going to do. But not that there isn't a place for it, but in the country, a little farther away. So the idea of regulating this, I guess, in the areas, probably like we've already done with the chickens, in those types of areas up against a home rule entity, I don't really, I guess, have much of an issue doing that. Provided that allowing chickens at this point in time, I don't see that as being a problem, the way we've got it already done. Bees, I don't know, we didn't really do anything with it, but if we want to maybe add something in that you could have a hive of bees, I'm just saying, in and of itself, I don't necessarily have, you could have a hive or two, but maybe even mentioning something like that. But you go much beyond that, and I can see how it can start intruding, you could say, on a neighbor's right to use and enjoy their piece of property. to speak to like John's, okay, well, if the, the farmhouse was already there with a little more acreage and they already had a few horses or cows or whatever, well, if you move into that, that was already there from my way of thinking. So to a degree, you kind of have no right to complain because you moved into it and that's always been there. But a residential in the areas that we're basically going to be addressing, it's not there now, and it's not the place for it. So those, I guess, are my thoughts. And again, I guess I hope we go ahead. Do I like that we're having, I guess you could say, I would say we're having to do this? No. But I think it's the right thing to do to go ahead and probably get something on the books. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I have an odd history that makes me oddly qualified to talk about this ad nauseum. For the better part of 2 decades, I was a farmer that lived out in Ag 1 and raised livestock for sale, for meat, for food, and begrudgingly, but nonetheless, I did it for quite some time. And just historically, when that decision was made in the House, and believe me, it was fought for a while, it was a lot of the same reasons that people recently here, the Harpers, talked about. Control of what you ate. Provide that to other people who also wanted to know where their food came from, which is important to me, still is. And did that for quite some time, but intentionally located it in Ag, and that 20-minute, 30-minute drive into work, or because I still worked in town, I was the one who commuted. And we followed all the basic guidelines that the Department of Ag wants. We were certified organic. We were licensed. We were allowed to sell eggs. We were allowed to sell whole chicken. We were allowed to do on-farm processing of fowl, chicken, turkey, duck, goose. Nobody bought goose. Goose is terrible. And that was all the way up to full-size cows. And it's a lot of work. I totally understand where you're coming from, and all I have to do is look at your blue jeans and know that you were working today, and you work every day. Doesn't matter what the weather is, doesn't matter what the holiday is, doesn't matter what the calendar says. But like Aaron, we sort of dodged a bullet with the bees. It sort of resolved itself, and the entirety of beekeeping in America, I think, came to most of our meetings. But that problem resolved itself, and this issue that's come up on Mattis there has changed. I wouldn't say it's resolved. I'd say it's changed, and it's not an immediate thing right now. But I agree that, well, first of all, I wrote this date down that Aaron said government is good on August 8th, 2024. And I won't forget that, Aaron. But I also agree with you about things. I'm a fan of racing. I can't tell you how many tracks that I was a fan of, especially out on the East Coast, that became surrounded by houses, and suddenly the racetrack was a problem, and they knew it was there when they moved in. One was on Airport Road because there was an airport. Guess what? Airport was a problem too. I'm not sure if they changed the name of the road, but if you move out into Ag, there's a wonderful handout the Farm Bureau had that explained what was going to change in your life. That a big truck was going to come and put propane into a bomb in your backyard. That when your water was out, you were going to go figure out why it was out because it was your well. When your toilet didn't flush anymore, you were going to get Gulliford out there and figure out why your local sanitary sewer system was more local than you wanted it for that evening. You're on your own a little bit, and independent-minded folks move out there. and do independent-minded things. And sometimes we do a little regulation with them too. So I would like to propose a few things. And I will say how I solved my problem with knowing about the food that I eat and the meat and things. I'm a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian now for 10 years. I probably have more right to eat chicken, goat, cow, and things than anyone else because I've killed them all with my hands a lot of times. But that's okay. I can let Aaron grow the beans and I can eat the tofu just as well. So that's how I worked around that problem. And that's how I took care of what I put into me. So I wrote some numbers down while people were talking that I'd just like to see as sort of like a draft idea. I looked at all of these. I looked at a few others. And there's two ways I think the board, we could think about this. We could think about some unique situations. I believe that in the western part of the county where Governor Edgar still lives, what is that called? Pine Acres? Or Pine Tree. There's a stable full of horses right in the middle of the residential neighborhood. And I'm sure they will all be here tomorrow if we say anything about horses. Horses have a tendency to self-regulate because they're big and they poop a lot, and people don't often have horses in town. I don't know if we need to go there, but it seems like for an ordinary residential lot, and we could maybe find a size that is big enough for more than this, that 6 hens, 2 beehives, no roosters, no horses, no goats, no pigs, no cows, no sheep, and other ordinary, what Norm would call barnyard animal. Whether we want that to be within 1,000 feet, whether we want that to be in places like Seymour, whether we want to put a size on it, I think that I'd entertain input from the board for that, and October is fine. We don't have an imminent thing to solve here, and I think it'll take some time to iterate this. But if you think you have time, do you have any ideas for numbers? Anybody on the board besides me? I'm sure we all have a sort of an idea. Do you think we want it to be similar to the rooster nuisance ordinance, where it's within 1,000 feet of a home rule for now? That was always intended to be expandable if we wanted to, including to Seymour. Do we want to start further out? Do we want to think, places like Dewey and Penfield and things where these are small residential lots that are zoned R? Do we want to reach that far out with our government is good, or do we want to stay close first? Emily, Chris, Mala? There, we're going to go around the room because that's what we do in broadband. We make everybody talk.
I agree with what John said earlier. I don't want it to affect neighborhoods like his old neighborhood. I don't want it to be too expansive and include areas where this isn't an issue. But I do think that it should be something that addresses areas where it is an issue. So I don't know if we should stick with the home rule or define residential area or how we handle that. But I just don't want it to be too broad. Also, that's my concern. So,
Dr. Storr?
Thank you. I too raised chickens and slaughtered them, and so I know a little, have a little experience there, and I think having a limited number of chickens on, I don't know, what's a typical residential lot, or do we have such a thing?
In our R1 district, the minimum lot size is 9,000 square feet. In R2, the minimum lot size is 6,500, and it doesn't get any smaller than that.
Okay. I would think a limited number of chickens on that, and I don't know what the number would be. And again, I agree, no, or chickens and ducks or something, and no roosters. And I like the idea of just having a couple of hives. I think that's, if it's in a residential area. Well, I drove out at that neighborhood, and I remember the bee controversy, and I sympathize with the folks that couldn't sit outside because of the bees.
And I'll tell you why, partially why I want to throw that in there, because the bee people will come, and maybe we can get the other stuff done, and we have something we can compromise on. So you see, I'm working all the angles.
Well, then we have to run this as two text amendments, because if it's all one, you're never going to see anything.
Okay, well, with that input from the zoning administrator, maybe we want to leave bees off of this for now, but it was my idea of a little smoke and mirror. But Emily?
I think I would like to see something in writing. Like we've kind of listed something aloud and I've heard it once. I would also like to see some justification and not just like name random numbers based off of what sounds good. I would like something in writing before I really have an opinion on this.
Yeah, so, we know this minimum lot size, but then, what would be the maximum? And we have to be careful. We say something like an acre, because this has come out a lot on the zoning board, a lot of the 1 acre lot that is marked out as 1 acre. In regards to a buildable area, you actually, in the country, and maybe this doesn't apply to a residential, but you own to the middle of the street, so your 1 acre has got a lot of place you can't use because you own half the road in front of your house. Does R do that, or does it stop with a right-of-way for the road, different than an ag lot?
Well, it depends on whether it's been in a subdivision. In the areas within 1,000 feet of a home rule municipality, almost everything has been in a subdivision. Not all, but generally almost everything.
And so they would have the road is independent of their
Yes,
lot.
yeah.
So
I also just wanted to add, it was mentioned earlier that we need to be, I guess, experts on this and issue detailed rules. Aside from zoning considerations, should we not be consulting something that has to do with animal welfare? Like, what are the general practices? What is humane to consider, housing a particular animal in a certain space? In general, I just think we need a lot more.
I think we have some templates very close to us in Champaign and Urbana, where chickens have lived for years in relative peace with other people. I mean, I have 3 houses away from me, people with chickens, in a couple directions, actually, I think, now without any problems. And this has been, many, many years. And those rules do seem to work. So that might be a starting point for, regarding hens anyway. And if we're going to think about prohibiting most of the other stuff, I don't know how far deep we have to get into animal husbandry with, like, for instance, pigs or sheep or something, if we're not going to allow them in these areas.
I think I would like a justification, so I can take it to constituents. Why can't you own a pig? Why is that a bad idea? That's what I would like to have in writing.
Okay, that's valid. So maybe this will take a little while, but yeah, I agree. I don't think that, as I said, I don't think this is an imminent danger. I don't think there's a lot of people that have the ambition, frankly, to go out and want to do this. Or the people that do have already gone out and done this. So, Aaron?
As I said, I think probably, I mentioned, the idea of probably the 1,000 foot of around the home rule. I think that's where probably would start. And again, see if we need to, could potentially expand it farther out, other areas if need be later on. I don't see it being an issue right now, and not that it's I guess a huge issue all in all, but again, since we've got the ball rolling, to kind of just halt any progress and then wait to pick it back up and have to restart from the beginning doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And I don't have a problem, I guess, with 6 chickens. I don't know, maybe up to 10 if it were me, but that might be too many. I mean, so 6 is fine with me. I don't have a problem on that.
John?
Yeah, I've still got questions. So I agree with Emily. I'd like to see something in writing. And I'm wondering if this isn't an issue. Maybe is this something that some of us need to talk to the Farm Bureau about, seek some input from them. I'm thinking of just in my district of places where I know people are raising livestock, and there's 6 or 7 houses and things. I mean, I can think of 3 or 4. My own family raises cattle, hogs, chickens, ducks, no goose right now. But it's in a ag subdivision. They've had to divide out as Grandpa has let other family members build houses out there. So I want to make sure that we're protecting those legacy properties, for lack of a better term, where people know that they're in there. So I want to make sure that's protected.
Yeah, and I'm not proposing anything in ag.
Right.
So,
But I
at
don't want to. I want to make sure we're dotting all our I's and crossing our T's if we do this. The other thing is, we do have complaints from Seymour already. So I think we should be addressing Seymour at the same time, which means we need to look beyond 1,000 feet.
Yeah, and that's where
So I'd like to
I'm
see that.
thinking of like a lot size. That, if we find the average lot size in Penfield and Seymour and downtown Mahomet and, anywhere, well, Mahomet is their own, but any place we have purview over, what is that minimum lot size and what's the average? Because if we just, don't allow it in the minimum, how many are actually at the minimum? But yeah, there's realistically, you can imagine in your head where, oh, that's cool, that's plenty of room, and where it's not. And, drive through Seymour and you'd say, well, I certainly would never think about having a horse in this backyard because, this only happens on television. So I don't know if we've given you enough direction. If you need some more from the board right now to kind of start putting something together for October.
I've got good direction. I really want to hear something else about, do you need to have bees included?
Well, given your reaction, I think you're allergic to bees, and I can honor that. And I think maybe you're correct that we should leave that off for now. That seems to be a whole different situation. And I frankly don't know enough about beekeeping. I mean, I had beehives on the farm. I think I had 25 at some point that someone else had there, and then I had about 10 that became my responsibility. But again, I was on 20 acres, and they were well away from people. But I know that there's a lot of urban beekeepers that have, there's bees in the cities that are on rooftops, and we might get ourselves stung, pardon the pun, if we get too far into the bee thing. So let's just kind of leave that off for now. I think we want to talk about the ordinary barn animal.
And in my mind, I mean, I have always ever thought about this, about being primarily within 1,000 feet of a home rule municipality, except for the Seymour problem with roosters in a small town. I'm glad to hear the committee's interested in doing something for Seymour. I don't know that we need to do anything else for places like Seymour other than prohibiting roosters. Because
and that might be sort of a two-phase thing. We're talking about a more restrictive prohibition within 1,000 feet of HR, and then some sort of, from the minimum to this size, an R in a town of this size, or I'm not sure how to, work this, or can we specifically go, hey, Seymour?
No, I would say in a residential district, roosters are prohibited
Yeah,
everywhere in the
this
county.
is very simple, and we'll see who crows about it. So
And
I'm just full of it tonight.
so, and you're right, you need to see a draft. That's always planned. I'll bring one as soon as I can, but it's probably not going to be before October.
Yeah, and if it's not October, we're not gonna, die on it. I think other things are gonna come up.
Yes. But anyhow, all right, well, thank you.
All right, thank you. That was good discussion. I think we can move on from that. And I hope that the members of the audience, feel like all of their sides have been heard. Moving on to item D, discussion regarding a zoning ordinance text amendment prohibiting carbon sequestration under or near a sole source aquifer. So we had a good presentation. I think what I'll do first is ask if there's members of the board that want to ask either Andrew or Pam any questions while they're here. I'll start with that. Anyone have any follow-up? Chris? Mala? All right. And when you're ready, don't forget how to turn your microphone on.
Thank you. Hello, thank you for being here and thank you for the presentation. Is this happening? I know you mentioned that it's happened in other parts of the world, that there have been leaks, and so you understand there'll be concern, but has it happened in the United States? Anything like this? And what are other states doing, if you know?
You probably know more.
So what we're finding here is that the storage of CO2 intended to be permanently stored is something that hasn't been done a whole lot, especially in this country. Much of what's happening is CO2 is being captured and it's being transported and it's being used for what's called enhanced oil recovery. So it's a bit of a different process. So the only project that people really talk about in this country is the ADM project in Decatur. And that's been, as I said, going on for a short time, like 12 years. So that's why we're sort of like amazed is not the right word, but the fact, alarmed, thank you, by the fact that we have so much happening all at once. It's not happening incrementally where we can say, okay, ADM is small, let's take another project that's bigger, and let's see what happens. We aren't doing that. We're doing all these projects all at once. And this is just the beginning. We have I won't go into that because that's way beyond what I need to say. This is just the beginning. We know there's more projects in process than that I reported on here. We know that we can expect to see more of this given the interest in hydrogen and blue hydrogen, which will require sequestering of CO2. And we really believe that putting it under a sole source aquifer is a bad idea. That's really what we're saying. We're not saying it shouldn't be put anywhere. What we're saying it should not be put under the aquifer, because if it does leak, there are some severe consequences.
Just to add a little, the Decatur project going for 12 years, they're proposing to store carbon for 1,000 plus before they say it gets into a stable form. So we know we're close to forever, right? So, have we tested any of this? Maybe not. There are some similar. Natural gas is the other thing that you inject underground, and it has a similar threat profile because it wants to come back up. And the Manlove Reservoir, which is a natural gas storage under the Mahomet, is the only natural gas storage under the Mahomet, and it leaked. which isn't to say that they would all leak, but it is 1 out of 1 in the Muhammad area. So another similar comparison where we're seeing problems.
Emily?
How would the Chevron decision, does that impact your thinking here at all?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
The Chevron decision, Supreme Court ruling, limits the amount of, the ability of federal regulators to enforce environmental law?
Yeah. No, I don't think that. I think the Chevron decision would essentially mean that perhaps there will be less carbon capture going on, right? But not, we're still expecting a ton of it because the $85 a ton incentive is still there. And so you're going to see it showing up in a lot of places. So I believe the Chevron decision, and I may be thinking of the wrong thing, but I believe it basically overturned a rule that said, hey, if you want to keep burning coal or natural gas, you have to put on carbon capture.
Not that one,
Wrong
no.
decision?
Wrong decision. And the Chevron decision, as I understand it, has a broader application at the federal level, not here at the state level. So, and it's another way of sort of saying the agencies that used to be responsible for making decisions about when there are questions about rules, the agencies used to do it. Now it's going to be handled at a different place. So, but that's not what we're talking about here. I mean, we're really hyper local here, hyper focused. State of Illinois and the aquifer.
Okay, so my question, or my concern, I guess, that what I'm basing it, a key part of your argument is that regulation poses a risk, a bigger risk, and eliminating it, or not allowing them to be built at all, is certainty. So
the regulation isn't a risk, it's just that the regulation isn't a guarantee. We've seen regulations fail all the time. I mean, I work for an environmental protection group, we're all for regulation, but sometimes it's easier just to ban it. Regulating it, you have to have people enforce it, you have to have permits, you have to have a whole process, you have to have tracking, you have to have reporting, you have to have the agency tracking that in addition to the company themselves tracking it. All of that adds up to 1 million failure points.
yeah.
A ban has 0 failure points. They're just not doing that thing that threatens our sole source aquifer.
Okay.
And I will just say those agencies in Illinois are going to be further strapped and stressed because of all of this carbon sequestration and Class 6 well proposals that are coming our way. So it'll be more difficult for them. And there's a tendency then to rely on the developer to do that initial reporting and monitoring. So.
Others? Questions? Chris?
Wanted to let everybody get their stuff out. I seem to recall, and I'm not trying to play, stump the staff, or stump the guests, but I seem to remember that the Safe CCS Act allowed or required a certain amount of money for fire.
Yes. For
How
emergency
much
response.
was that?
How much is it? Those fees haven't been identified yet. It's a regulatory bill, and what will happen is it'll go into a rulemaking process, and then all those fees will be
For
established.
pipelines.
For pipelines.
For sequestration, it's 32 cents per ton or 16.
For emergency, or just going into
It's the fund, which
Okay, so
also
long-term
partially
fund.
covers.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Well,
I don't know.
there are funds. If your point is that there are funds set up, and the new state bill would require funds to have emergency response in place, yes.
I don't remember what it was, but it didn't strike me as very much. And
I mean, the incentive is $85 a ton, and the fee was 32 cents a ton.
I think that's true.
I'll just say that I prepared a few things of my own. Would this be a good time to rant? Okay. One of the things that several things, came to mind, and I distributed a paper with some of these. And, of course, the protection of the groundwater quality and sustainable supply is paramount, because this is the sole source of our drinking water. It's our livelihood, it's our life. And the boundaries of the Muhammad Aquifer, which we depend on, are not yet well known, and neither is the geology or hydrogeology. And in fact, we don't even have a real good grasp on what the recharge of the aquifer is. This is a real problem for me, and something that is slowly being worked on. Unlike Southern Illinois, the geologic structures in and around of the area north of Charleston and in the general Wisconsin glaciated area are not very well known. And it's because all of the coal mining and oil exploration and development in southern Illinois has yielded a lot of geologic information that we can use, so all that's known. And we don't have that around here. Furthermore, there has not been, to my knowledge, an independent or thorough investigation of the Man-Love gas field leak. We have only a declaration from the gas company that somebody saw bubbles around the well, and that attracted attention. Is that the only source of the gas? And if they have repaired the well, why are residents still getting gas in their water? So this kind of gets back to how are the regulators, how are our state regulators helping us as citizens and providing oversight. Well, I'll get to that one. I think that we ought to accelerate the HTEM studies of the superficial and bedrock geology of the Muhammad Aquifer area. We know, we since learned that the HTEM is starting to yield interesting information not only about the glacial geology, but also about the bedrock geology. And I think that that's needed before before we start doing a fair amount of injection, and then coming up, discovering leaks later or problems later. The other sorts of large-scale projects, nuclear power plants, landfills, and so forth, require safety analysis and sometimes special provisions for monitoring, maintenance, public reporting, and so forth. I'd like to see that, particularly where we have an additional risk to public health and safety. Lastly, I think that we're faced with not just this particular problem of carbon capture and sequestration. We've got another interesting threat to perhaps to our water supply, and that is geothermal wells, particularly if they are not closed loop wells. And it's my understanding that some of these may be proposed again to the Mount Simon, and that they'd be open loop wells. Ideally, this would not be a particular problem because you're not putting down more than what you're pulling out. The point being is that we're having more and more, I don't want to say threats, but it's not a wrong term either, to our sole source aquifer. I think that the time has come, and I'm going to say thank you, Aaron, for kind of saying that government may be necessary. I think the time has come for a Mahomet Aquifer Watershed Authority with the ability to raise funds and exercise legal regulation needs to be enacted to ensure the preservation of our groundwater quality and sustainable supply for the future of this area. I know this may not be a particularly popular idea, but there are 13 smaller water authorities already in existence over the Mahomet Aquifer. And they tax and exercise some regulation. Not that I know that they do very much in the way of regulation, but they do tax in order to support their the water authority. And I think that a aquifer-wide watershed authority would be the sort of, one person put it, sword and shield that is necessary for us to protect our water supply. And Elizabeth, it's all on this piece of paper. So what I would propose is a resolution very similar to what you saw on the slides presented, and it's on the back side of the little sheet of paper, a 6-month moratorium on injection of CO2 through a sole source aquifer, or Mahomet, and the underground storage of carbon dioxide under a sole source aquifer, while the county looks at concerns, feasibility of a prohibition, and I use that term as because I think that it's a good starting point to start talking, and need for use for special use permit for those activities, and that the moratorium can be renewed or extended if more time is needed.
Thank you, Chris. Other input? Yeah, I was contacted a while ago, I guess, about this, and Chris and I have talked about it a little bit previously. With the incentives, there's no question in my mind that once profit can be made, that this is going to happen. And there are places where it's appropriate. And I don't think it's a bad thing to do. I don't think we know everything about it, but I think that we definitely know that if you like it hot, it's going to get hotter. And, at some point, the only way to get some of these things to happen, for example, when we were destroying the ozone layer, a very similar incentive program came up, and lo and behold, the hole closed rather quickly because people made profit on it. When you can get Bezos making profit, things happen quickly. So it's going to happen, but I don't think it should ever happen under a sole source of water for people. In this act, it says that an alternate source of water has to be provided by whoever it is who's going to inject this. I don't think they have the money to buy enough bottled water to take care of everyone who gets water from the Mahomet Aquifer. And I think that that's just, foolish thought to think that is going to solve anything. So I agree. I think at a minimum, we should be looking at a 6-month moratorium. I think that's something that we can do. I think that should be open-ended. And we have the study in progress now to know more about it. This topic has been going on for a long time. We don't know where the aquifer really is. We don't know its recharge rate, as you said. I think the word maybe you were looking for was intrusions upon the aquifer. I think that every time somebody drills a hole in the ground, it's another intrusion and another potential way to get things into it from above. And this is, now we want to come up from the bottom into it as well. So thank you for this framework. I think it's a framework that we could work with. And then, as you propose, I think that the ZBA should have hearings about this so that we can do something better than a 10-minute time limit on 2 people. So I don't know how much direction you want, John, for this. I think that, I don't know if the board agrees or disagrees, but I think, John?
Well, since we're writing down things, I'd like you to record today that I echo every word you just said. That needs to be memorialized somewhere.
Yeah, I'm going to go buy lottery tickets.
Yes. No, I could not agree more with everything you just said. I guess my only question before we go into giving you directive is, and part of this is just to understand, the proposed plants aren't in Champaign County right now. So if we do this, are we just really doing it for Champaign County and going, well, we did something? Or do we need to be, we don't have any authority to affect anybody in Macon County or McLean County, right? This isn't, so these plants could still happen no matter what we do. Am I understanding that correctly? So we also need to be activists and encourage our county board counterparts in other counties to do the same thing.
Yeah, and that's was sort of laid out in the presentation, that we want to be really loud voices. We've been loud voices in Champaign County before. Politics aside, we are the little blue square in downstate Illinois. But because Springfield and Chicago are little blue squares, they sometimes listen to what we have to say. Good work was done for the aquifer. They led a lot by Champaign County, and I think we need to push that. Aaron?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Something you said, the ZBA having hearings. I guess my question is, what you and or maybe John Hall, what would their role be having the hearings? I mean, what would the ZBA do with it once they had these hearings, if they had these hearings?
I wouldn't want to take anything to the ZBA that this committee hasn't seen, but I think the thinking is do as much as you can under zoning, and we do have control. As I understand it, we can regulate the injection points, prohibit them, if you will.
Okay.
We could have a moratorium. I don't know what we can do about the general topic, and again, we can only do something about it Champaign County, and none of these wells are proposed in Champaign County, thank goodness. But I guess, to me, it seems like get your zoning house in order, but at the same time, the county board has to work at a state level also, which is, I don't think it's this committee, but maybe.
Yeah, I think we can start it here. We've started other things here before.
Okay.
What is the name of the committee again?
Okay, thanks. Because I was just wondering, because I guess I kind of see this as more. Yeah, from the zoning side, okay, I can see that. Yeah, but also just if we were to look to, maybe we want to say ban it. Well, that's obviously something more county board, and maybe we need to have more discussion actually at either ELUC or the full county board. I don't know. ZBA, this issue, I don't think would be necessarily super controversial, except for the people that would maybe have something to gain monetarily for, by having it sequestered. But most, I think the people that actually are going to be affected, which I don't get my water directly from the Mahomet, so, but not who's to say that it couldn't potentially eventually, however many years from now, get into the water that I'm drawing out of my well. But I don't see that being super controversial. But I guess if the ZBA has it, it would be nice to maybe see some of the ELEC members show up at some of them too, some of these meetings, the hearings, just to hear the public's input directly.
Yeah, I think that John points out, get the zoning house in order. I think that even though none are proposed in Champaign County now, that if someone were to propose one not under the aquifer, it should still be a special use permit. It should be something that goes through a thorough review, ZBA, ELOC, full board. And that's something that, would definitely have a path there. The good part about the zoning board is there's no limit on public input. I know, I've sat through a lot of them. But it becomes a good forum for people to come and feel comfortable speaking for good or ill for an extended amount of time. Aaron?
I hear that too, but I guess I kind of think of it as sometimes we've maybe pushed a bunch off onto the ZBA when we should maybe just suspend our rules on time limits. And since we're the board over the ZBA, we should take on some of these bigger issues, and we should be the ones getting all the flack, I guess you could say, from both sides of an issue, and not necessarily push it off onto the ZBA. And then, quite frankly, once the ZBA says, well, this is what we're wanting to do, oh, well, sorry, we don't like what you're recommending, so we're going to not take that and really apply that and do our own thing. That's kind of how I come at it. So
Okay, so if we're writing
kind
things
of
down.
think that, again, we should take on some of these, and again, we're the bigger board. We have the more authority. We should maybe be willing to sit till midnight if it takes it. I mean, we could cap our meetings. We don't have that in the rules, but we could cap it at, instead of 5 minutes apiece, we're going to have, if we think it's going to be big, we're going to have a ELEC meeting or a special meeting or something, and say we have public input for 2 hours tonight, and once we reach that, then I'm just throwing that out there. Then we'll, okay, if there's maybe one more person, we'll maybe extend it, or we'll just cap it and go on and do whatever else we need.
Okay, this isn't as rare, but write it down that I agree with Aaron. I think maybe since we're stepping out there and deciding we want to do this, I agree, Aaron. I think we should be the ones that take the brunt of the work and not throw it down the hill and hope that somebody else pushes it back up to us and then tell them that we didn't like what they did with it. So I agree with you. So kind of scratch that idea for now, maybe. I think we want to work on this here. I think I would like to see something as soon as possible that says something about a 6-month moratorium to start that comes out of this committee that goes to the full county board. And Chris, you have a nice framework here. I think that's something to work with. And then as that distills down and we learn more, maybe then we can direct ZBA to come up with conditions for a special use permit should anyone apply for one here. But at the moment, I don't think that's a thing that's going to happen. So I don't think that's as urgent a problem. And I'd love nothing more than to be sitting in this room and listen to people come and tell me about how they're going to make a lot of money doing this, and we shouldn't worry about what we drink. And everybody likes a little sparkling water nowadays, right? acid-filled sparkling water filled with heavy metal. So it'd be like me moving back to Jersey again. So, so is that enough direction for a start?
Well, I guess the first thing I'm going to do is check with the state's attorney to see if a moratorium is itself a zoning ordinance regulation that needs to go through a public hearing. I would not recommend this committee be the public hearing body. Use your ZBA and then invite all the public participation that happens at ZBA to also happen here. But I don't think this committee wants to start being a public hearing. But if a moratorium is not a zoning mechanism, it's something else, then that'd be great to do here at ELUC. So I'm going to
Okay.
talk to the state's attorney.
So that's the direction, I guess. The first thing would be to find out what the state's attorney says, as expeditiously as they answer questions at the state's attorney's office.
They're
And-
more expeditious these days.
Well, that's good.
And I did make them aware of this topic, so this isn't going to be something new.
Okay. And then see, and with that, then we find out where we go from there. And I want to thank you folks for coming and sticking around to answer questions for us. I think that's enough now on this topic. We'll see if the News Gazette's listening. Hello, News Gazette. How are you tonight? If you're going to quote me, quote it right. And spell my name right. That's what they always say, right? So moving on, I guess I need my glasses for this. New business items to be recommended to the county board. We have a revised contract for sale for county property at 2603 Campbell Drive in Champaign. John, you want to fill us in on the brief details of this?
Yes, there was a contract going to the county board back in 2019. It was pulled off of the agenda because it had been prepared, assuming the county could do a, well, it wasn't a quick claim deed. It was the other thing, which warranty deed, which the county cannot do. It has to be a quick claim, and it's simply taken this long to get things turned around. I've had new guidance from the state's attorney's office. I've contacted the prospective purchaser who was still interested. He's had 10% down this whole time, and so we're trying to move ahead on getting rid of some properties. This is the first one.
Aaron,
I'd move to approve this for forwarding to the full county board.
do I have a second? Mala, second. Thank you for the legal backup, Mala. Any more discussion on this? It's been a while, so I think it can move forward. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? All right, that's unanimous. The update on dangerous structures enforcement, John?
And I apologize to the committee. This is not an item for the county board. This is an update for the committee. But there have been, there's been a lot of turnover on the committee since we last did one of these updates. And so this table brings you up to date on dangerous structures since 2009. I think it's fair to say more dangerous structures have been taken care of by the private sector than the county, which is as it should be. That's good. Three things on this table. We have the 2603 Campbell Drive new contract for sale. We have a property at 404 Dodson Drive South that we were going to demolish, and then we started getting calls about people wanting to buy it to rehabilitate. And I think it would be better for the neighborhood if the property could be rehabilitated. That would be a quicker way of getting it back on the tax roll than demolishing. So I'm going to advertise that for sale on the county website. And hopefully, I've had 3 parties call about it, so you might even see an offer on this in the next month or 2. That's what I'm hoping. We also have a property at 202 3rd Street in Foosland. We have a pending offer on that, and I hope to bring that to you maybe next month. The other big things here on this table, the things that stand out to us at a staff level, is we have a couple of old mobile home parks in the county that have just fallen into complete disrepair. They never had proper approvals. They're not going to get proper approvals unless they get significantly rehabilitated. And we don't have any at a point where we've even sent out a notice yet, but we'll be doing that hopefully in the next year. The one that's just outside of Urbana, the owner is trying to deal with that, but it's a situation where the homeowners own the trailers. He doesn't have the titles. The trailers need to be just demolished at this point, and so he's trying to deal with that. I think it'll be a while before the county could step in and do anything there. The bigger issue is the Triangle Mobile Home Park up south of Ludlow. We have gotten complaints from farmers about debris blowing from that mobile home park into the fields. The state of Illinois shut the park over water quality issues. That's an ongoing court case. We're not going to do anything before that court case is resolved. So this is just basically a heads up at this point. There's these festering problems out there that we'll deal with as soon as we can. We'll bring it to you as soon as we can, but nothing's going to happen soon, I don't think.
Any questions for John? Mala?
I don't know if this question is appropriate for this, but this is my first time seeing it, so I was pretty interested. When someone buys the property, how long do we give them to get it up to code or safety or?
Well, it depends on the situation, but if it's a dangerous structure, literally, with our notice, we give them 2 weeks to let us know what they're going to do. Now, they don't have to have a plan in 2 weeks, but they have to contact us, tell us that they're working on a plan. For example, a burn structure, it might take 2 years easily for the insurance to be resolved. So we have to be realistic about insurance. Otherwise, you know, we don't expect properties to be cleaned up in 2 weeks, but we expect some kind of a plan, certainly in a few months, and then show us that you're making progress. And as long as you're making progress, that's what we're looking for. It'd be nice to have resolution in a year, but we have to be realistic also. And just taking somebody to court isn't necessarily going to get something done sooner. But if they're not showing progress, that's when we refer them to the state's attorney's office for legal action. But if we can do it without referring to the state's attorney, we will, because that's not a fast process at all. And we just want to make progress.
All right, any other questions for John on this topic? And again, it's not for vote, it's just for discussion, so. All right, moving along then. It looks like there's no monthly reports this month. Shame on you, John. Just fine. There's no chair's report. And we have one item to be placed on the consent agenda. If those people feel comfortable enough with Campbell Drive being on consent, that would be 9A. And with that, again, thank you. It was looking tight there 5 minutes before the meeting, but we wound up with everybody that was possible to be here, so that's really good to see. I call this meeting adjourned at 8:15.